I'm going to be trying something new today, which is that I'm going to try talking without a script to see if I can make videos faster. And so today I want to talk about agency and communion, which are the two fundamental human social motivations. And once I learned about them, I realized I see them everywhere, but it's a concept that I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about, and which I think is pretty important. I learned about it through this book, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, which is a book that I might want to talk about for a couple of reasons in the future, but he just mentioned this as a throwaway line about these are the two fundamental human social motivations. He mentioned women generally prioritize communion more, men generally prioritize agency more, but everybody needs both. And that was basically what I remember about it from this particular book. However, I then realized, so first of all, I'm like, oh, that totally makes sense. Like, whenever I've struggled with mental health stuff, it's always been feeling like a lack of agency, thwarted agency, or isolation, lack of communion. Then I read, well, I don't remember the exact order I read these, but I read Ghost in the Machine by Arthur Koestler, this is one of the nonfiction books, the two nonfiction books I would say have had the biggest impact on my life and thinking. And this is the book that introduces the term holon. The idea of a holon is something that is complete in itself, but also part of a larger whole. And so it has two faces. Facing down, it tries to exert agency. Facing up, it seeks communion with a greater whole. And then two other books that have the same topic, the same idea. So Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And so he talks about basically people have three reasons for living, which are achievement. So you can live for achievement, you can live for love, or you can live basically for the sake of living. And so this is the third one is obviously not a social value. It is more like the accepting the things you cannot change in the Serenity Prayer. But agency and communion are both in Frankl's account of basically the these are two of the three reasons people have to keep living. And then we have I and Thou by Martin Buber. And so in this Kaufmann translation, he uses I, you instead of I, thou. I'm going to use them interchangeably because I think of them as I, thou, but I know it's I, you, and Kaufmann liked that better. But anyways, in this book, Martin Kaufmann talks about the I-it relation and the I-you relation. And he argues that in modern society, we undervalue thou, or I-you, in favor of I-it. But the I, the sense of self, cannot exist without a relationship to one or the other. And the way he describes it, the I-it relation is pretty clearly a desire to express agency, and the I-you is an attempt to express communion. And then also, this book, Spiral Dynamics, so this is best known because of a book that Ken Wilber wrote, which I actually have but forgot to grab before filming this video. And Ken Wilber changed some aspects of it, and one of the things he changed that I think a big chunk of sort of what was important about the original idea is that they distinguish between warm colors in the spiral and cool colors in the spiral, with warm colors representing desire for agency, and cool colors representing desire for communion. And so this is a developmental levels thing, and people tend to prioritize one or the other more at different levels. And Ken Wilber took that out in his color coding in order to make it more... I mean, his color coding looks more attractive than this, but he lost what I feel like is an important dimension of the original book. I also noticed that I see it in this book, which is I've called it the best worst self-help book I've ever read. And I have a blog post about that coming out tomorrow afternoon, or today afternoon probably when I'm posting this. And so he has a 6-way division between sort of levels of getting a task done from the highest level to the lowest level. So there's 3 of those. And then there's also a division between I forget what he calls them exactly, but the reactive and the inventive or something. And so the reactive is communion, the proactive is agency. And I have a lot of issues with the way he wrote this book. I also have several issues with the ideas in it, but I do think at a high level, this idea of sort of breaking things down into 3 levels of implementation, or 3 levels of getting stuff done, from the highest level of abstraction to sort of actually planning and working out how to do it to actually doing it. And the secondary distinction between whether you approach these through a more communion-focused way or a more agency-focused way, I think is valid as well. And so there are other places I've seen that, sort of. One thing about agency and communion is in the Taoist yin-yang, agency kind of lines up with yang and communion with yin, but the yin-yang groups a lot of other things together too. And so I've been thinking about, because there are a lot of things that have similarities, but they can cross-cut them, which again, here, for example, they are cross-cutting the levels of implementation. But I feel like these are important concepts to understand, because when you realize that, you realize basically, if you're trying to do something, you have basically two reasons you're doing it, which is either you want to achieve something from doing it, or you want to feel a connection from doing it. And often what we try to achieve is social, or the connection we're trying to feel is social, and so you can have authentic and inauthentic versions of agency and communion, which is a different topic. But I felt like this was an important idea, and I wanted to talk about it because it's something I've been thinking about a lot for my first impromptu off-script video. And so thank you for watching. I'm Magpie, this is Reading as a Skill, and I will see you next time.